Okay, well, I think we have a critical mass here. We've got 50 people on, so I want to say welcome to all of you. This is Kathy Smith from the Calvin Institute of Christian Worship, hosting this webinar on Beyond the Life of the Project, and Satrina Reed is here as my co-host. As we've noted, this is a webinar, so we can't see all of you, but you can send us questions through the Q&A feature. And we can also keep an eye on the chat if you put comments in there. So thank you for being here. I'm going to go through some material to talk about what we hope for you as you conclude your project and go beyond the project. And then we'll definitely have time for Q&A after that. So anytime you have a question, please put it in that Q&A and we will come to that afterwards. Okay, now I am going to stop sharing this introductory slide, and then hopefully I can pull this off. I'm going to move over to my PowerPoint presentation and try to share that with you all. And are you seeing the PowerPoint now, Satrina?
Yes, okay. We're good.
Okay, because on my computer, it's still showing the other one, but okay. So beyond the life of the grant, you've had a year of working on these projects. Some of you have done projects before with us, so you've been through this process, but we find it's really helpful to take a little time and think about how did we get through this year? What did we learn? What went well? What didn't go so well that we can learn from? But to take that learning and then think ahead. How do we bring that both into a report to us after you finish your project, but also how do you extend that learning throughout the months and years ahead in your worshiping communities as well? So that's the big question. And those of you who, have been with us for a year, we talk about learning a lot. This is a worship grants program, and there's a lot of emphasis on renewal of worship and on innovation and enriching worship and doing new things. But we don't do those things just for themselves and just for the excitement of them. We really want to figure out what can we learn through this process. And even in the budget forms that you fill out, the majority is about learning and opportunities for learning. So now as we come to the close of the year or towards the close of the year, it's really important to think about how do we go about gathering up our learning. You're going to have to write a final report, and we hope that you get together with a group, whether it's your team or a broader group of your organization or your worshiping community, but take some time to ponder what we have learned this year, because it's important for you to do that, and it's important for us to learn along with you. I'm going to show you a chart here. It's Peter York's a logic chart. And this particular example isn't about worship, but then we're going to apply it to worship. But notice how this is an assessment or a learning plan for a program. This particular program had a goal of decreasing homelessness, but it's something that we can look at the pattern as well. Look at those 5 things across the top. There are inputs, strategies, outputs, outcomes, and impact. Now, if we think about inputs, those are the resources necessary to support a program. So funding is a big thing. And for this particular program, bus tickets and people with skills and knowledge and training materials and coaching, etc. Those are the things they inputted into the project. And then there are strategies, specific activities or programs to serve a particular audience. So in that example, they provided job training to homeless individuals and transportation and job coaching and support groups. Those were the strategies that they used for their project. And then they evaluated what came out of that effort. So outputs are the measures of program strategy implementation. How many people attended these things? How many people actually got jobs and had bus tickets and received hours of coaching, attended support groups? So those outputs are kind of the things we quantify, right? Of how well we did with the strategies that we planned. And then outcomes are the shorter or longer term effects of those program strategies. What are the effects on people's behavior? How do we change as a result of all this effort? And in this example, the clients met or exceeded the requirements of the jobs that they were trained for. And most of them, a vast majority, held their jobs for over 6 months. So those are particular outcomes, also quantifiable outcomes. And then we come to the last one, the impact, the long-term effect of a sustained program. And the impact of this program was that they actually did decrease homelessness in their community through all these strategies. So that's one program, not a worship program, but we can take that same pattern and apply it to our projects and think about our worship grant projects. So if we go through the 5 things, we think about inputs. What are the inputs? Well, your grant funds was a big part of the inputs, right? But also there were other inputs. There were the people with ideas and skills and abilities to carry this out. Other resources that you had in terms of space or materials, and certainly the gifts of the people that were involved in the project. Those were all the inputs. And then you had strategies, you had events, or you planned retreats, or you had book studies or special services and series. You brought speakers in, you went to places to visit other worshiping communities, all sorts of strategies that you had in your various grants programs. And then now when you come towards the end of your year, you start to measure the outputs. It could be how many people attended, how many events did we have, what percentage of people indicated that it was worthwhile and that they learned from it. Sometimes the quantifiable measures are also qualitative, right? So we had 50% of the people involved in the project, but 90% of them indicated that they really enjoyed it and learned from it about worship. Those are all outputs that come out of the strategies that you had in your grant projects. And then the outcomes would be those short or long-term effects on people. How did we change? How did we learn and grow? How can we say the behaviors of the people and the faith formation of the people in our worshiping communities grew? And so then we can start thinking more deeply about the outcomes that we notice, whether we found those out through surveys or conversations, or maybe we still want to hold some further events and gatherings, might be Zoom gatherings, right? Because we're still apart in most places, but ways to evaluate those outcomes and then get to the goal for us all, which is, what was the impact of your project? What was the impact of what you intended to do, and how did it impact your community, your worshipers, whether it was through music or art or dance or thinking deeply theologically or expanding worship services and connecting with the community more? What was that real deep impact? That's the kind of thing we really want you to think about as you plan to write us a final report, and really as you go through the process for yourselves of reviewing and reviewing what you've done and how you've learned from it. So we found this to be a very helpful chart and helpful construct, and we offer that to you as you go about concluding your grant projects. Now, what have you learned? Well, we think about, what did you learn about worship? That's one of the questions we always ask. What did you learn about worship that you didn't know or experience in the same way before this grant project? What did you learn about yourselves? What did you learn about your church or organization? Some grant projects learn that they have wonderful people that they got included that hadn't been involved before. Some grant projects learn that when you try new things and you push a little bit, even though they're exciting and wonderful, you get a little pushback. So sometimes the learning is how to deal with the resistance that can come. And how do we, as leaders, adjust to that and listen to those folks and help them to understand and to work together? So what do we learn about how our church or our organization as a body reacts to change? And how can we help learn from that so that the next time around we can implement change in good and healthy ways? And then thirdly, what did we learn about God through our projects? What did we learn about how God works in and through us? And what did we learn about how God's word dwells in us and in our worship, and how God's word was proclaimed perhaps in new and deeper ways through the worship or the activities, the events, all the different things you did in your projects? So we hope you think about this and talk about this as you do your own evaluation of your project. We also like to think ahead. How are you going to sustain what you learned? Okay, how will you keep the conversation going? The project may end and the activities funded by the grant may end, but we hope the learning conversation will continue. And we find that when we check in with folks, 2, 3, 5, even 10 years later, they say, what we started in that grant project really made an impact, and it changed the course of things, or it helped us to get in some new places. So thinking about how you can sustain the learning that you've done this year is really important. And then also thinking how to continue those practices. Many of you have started new practices this year that you've never tried before. And maybe some of them don't continue because they didn't work out so well. But most of the time, there are things that you do want to continue and continue to enrich the worship that you have or the communities that you're working with. So think about how you can continue those practices, and then also how you can share and disseminate the learning that you've had. Maybe it's something that you write internally in a church newsletter or an organizational post on a website. Maybe it's something you can share beyond your church or organization if there's a broader organization you're part of, or through your denomination, or in your community with the other churches and organizations around you. We would really encourage that kind of sharing, and we'd like to hear about it too. So if those kinds of things are published, we would love for you to send us the link to that, because we're all about learning and we want to be sharing, right? And now, how can you finish well? We really want these grant projects to conclude well, and so you can, eventually kind of tie a bow around it and say, yeah, that project is done and it was a good thing and we finished it well. And there are some details that go along with that too that we want to talk about. So one thing actually is budget revisions. Some of you may have spent all the money already, but there probably are plenty of you who still have funds remaining, and they may or may not fit into the budget that you've already agreed upon. So the question is it too late to make budget revisions for some of your unspent funds? It's not too late. In fact, we would prefer, if you have unspent funds, we would prefer that you would request a revision so that you can use all the funds rather than to send them back. I'm going to just pitch it over to Satrina a moment. You want to say a word here about budget revisions? You have to unmute.
I was trying to be a good teammate here and not have all my background noise. But I wanted to say that I'm going to share my screen very quickly.
Okay.
And that will show you I'm going to show you where you can actually put those actual funds. at the end of your grant, when you get ready to finish everything up, we need actual spending. You'll see this in column F. If you come over to our session at 3 o'clock, we'll go more specifically into that. But we're going to need your actual spending, what you actually spent in this column. So when you have any monies left over, sometimes we have really received checks back for 32 cents. We do not want that. Buy somebody a piece of candy or gift it. but we don't need those funds back. But what we would ask you to do is to consider, how can we celebrate together? Or maybe, are there any other books that we could that would benefit us in this project, or to benefit the congregation? But figuring out ways that you can utilize the funds. Otherwise, the funds do need to come back, and they would need to come back. They would need to come back to Calvin Institute of Christian Worship, and you would be given directions as to how that is to happen. But if you have questions about, how can we spend these funds, or can we spend these funds this way, since we have monies left over, then you can always contact us at worshipgrants@calvin.edu. But otherwise, if you've got budget revision questions, we'll ask that you would please just show up at 3 o'clock, and we'll get more into that. But it is very important that we receive your actual Calvin Institute of Christian Worship grant form, grant budget form back, not your own form that you may have been using in the house. And it makes it a lot easier for us to work with your budget at the end, when we receive back the budget in the form that we approved it. So I think that's it. I think we could get into more details as we go into the budget revisions. And I'm sorry, I think I knocked you out.
Now I will, let's see, go back to sharing my screen.
There you go.
Did I manage it?
You did.
Okay, good. So yeah, as Satrina said, we would prefer that you make budget revisions. Of course, the revision always has to be within the purpose of the grant. But we've found a lot of grants that just say, hey, we want to have a nice, let's have a summer picnic and talk about the end of our grant. So maybe you want to put some funds into that sort of an event, even though you didn't have it in your original plan. But that's the kind of thing that would fit. And so we would approve that too. So yeah, you'll get instructions on that, and we'll get more detail if you go to the webinar at 3 o'clock about how to make budget revisions. You'll be writing a year-end report. So the question is, what is the purpose of a year-end report that's due on July 15, or if you took the extension, November 15? I think everybody knows that we offered the opportunity for people to extend their grant beyond July 15. We've never done that before, but I don't think we've had a pandemic before in the time that we've had this grants program either. And so many of you, like, we're online here because we can't be together. And so many of you had to cancel events or had speakers that couldn't come because of the pandemic. And you said, well, maybe we can do those things in the fall. Now, who knows what happens in the fall, but we did grant those extensions to November the 15th to give the opportunity for that. And yeah, if those events still can't happen, then maybe you can do some creative things about accomplishing the goals in other ways and using the funds. But the real purpose of the year-end report is so that we can learn from you, and we gather up the learning that we get from all of these churches and organizations all across the continent. And then we're accountable too for the learning that we do as an institute. But we also want this to happen because you know how it is when you have to fill out a report and answer these questions and get a group together. It helps you to learn. It helps you to crystallize the things that you've learned this year. So the purpose is to help us learn, but it's also to help you learn. So we hope that it's a good exercise for you. There's a question here about what format we should use for the year-end budget. So Trina always said that the screen that she shared, so that Excel document that we've been working for is what you need for the year-end budget, where you show your expenditures, as she said. How detailed or accurate should be. Every year we get questions from folks. Do we have to send you a list of everything we bought and a copy of all the receipts and all those details? The answer to that is no. We don't require that kind of detail. You should have that on hand in your own financial system, and many of you have regular audits, or you could be audited and you would have to, show how you used all the funds for the purpose of the grant. But we don't require that kind of detail turned into us. What we require turned into us is the one Excel form that shows all the expenditures and then whether or not there are any funds left. I don't know, Sabrina, did you want to say anything more about that, or are we good?
I think we're good. I just,
Okay.
I think I may have had a thought before, but no, I think we're good. I
Okay.
think we're good. Mhm.
Well, I'll keep going, and if you have something, definitely jump in, okay? Sometimes people wonder, will anyone read this report? Yes, we read them. And you will get a personalized response from us to your report. And it will also then indicate when we consider your project to be closed, and we'll let you know if we've received any funds back from you or acknowledge if all the funds have been spent. So we do read them because we do enjoy learning from them, and it's part of our learning process. And as most of you know, we also are grant recipients, and we are accountable to the Lilly Endowment for the learning that we have. So your reports help us to put together our reports on a much bigger scale as far as what we are learning about worship in North America. But trust me, we'll read them and we will write you back. Just to reinforce, do we really have to return those unspent funds? Yes, you do. If you don't use all the funds and you don't propose a revision to use them, then you do need to return them to us per the letter of agreement. It's a check made out to Calvin University and you send it to us at the Calvin Institute of Christian Worship. We'll send you information about that. But if you wonder what we do with it, the monies that come back, we put right back into the pot for the next round of grants, okay? So it will help another group with a grant project, but you don't have to send it back for that reason. I just want you to know that that's how those funds are used into the next round. Okay. Just to talk a little bit more about sustainability, and then we're going to go to questions. This year-long process that you've had has probably had a lot of new things. And we notice over the years that we see a lot of new habits of worship that are created and imagined and implemented. Often new people are involved that haven't been involved before. New gifts are used. There's a new understanding of worship that develops, or a deeper understanding of worship. Maybe new connections in the community, new connections with other churches. There's a lot of new things, and those things make a difference. And it's really pretty exciting for us to see the impact overall of so many people and so many congregations making all things new, certainly in the power of the Spirit and guided by our Lord. But those seeds that have been planted will continue to grow and bear fruit. And we've seen this time and time again, and we know that you know this too, but it's worth repeating, that what is planted in us, just in our own, as in our own spiritual lives, what's planted in us grows and bears fruit. That's also true with what's planted in your worshiping communities through this grants program. It will grow and bear fruit, and we look forward to hearing about the fruit that comes out of this project, and we'll hear about that on your reports. But we look forward to hearing about that even later as you continue in your ministries and in your worshiping. We would encourage you to share your learning with other congregations around you. I already kind of touched on that, but we'd strongly encourage you to find ways to share the learning with others. You're going to share your learning with us through the reporting, or you can always send us notes and all that. We enjoy that much. And you can also share your learning with other grantees. If you aren't part of it already, we would invite you to join our Facebook group. And you see there what other grantees are doing. And if you send us maybe a link to an article or a post about your project, we'd probably post it there for others to see, or you can post things too or ask questions. So that's another way to share the learning. About once a year, we send emails to the project directors, as many as email addresses we have from all the years gone past, and just ask, how is it going? How much of your grant project is still implemented and still bearing fruit? And what have you been learning since your project? So about once a year, you can expect to get an email like that from us. So that's most of what I have to say here. I think I'm gonna stop sharing now and get back to our main screen. And now's the time that we can take some questions from you. If there's anything that wasn't clear enough, I see there's one question from Ellen about the chart. Okay, so the chart that I showed early on, we can make that available to you. And I'm trying to think what would be the best way to do that, Satrina. We could post it somewhere or email it to them. I can't hear you, Satrina.
I will keep a list of what we need to send to folks.
Okay, so we will make sure that that chart is sent to everybody, and maybe I have a PDF with the example one that's not about worship, and then the blank one. We'll send that to everybody. Okay. Let's see. Are grant participants able to review the composite learning? We don't make public our reports to the Lilly Endowment, but we do find other ways to gather up the learning, whether it's through communications to you, or sometimes we post things on our website, what we're learning from the entire program. And actually, the fact that you asked the question is going to be an encouragement for us to remember to do that. And to communicate to all of you some of the general learning that comes out of the program. So yes, thank you for that. Other questions that people have? Yeah, please do join the Facebook group. And it's a closed group. So when we see you join it, we'll let you in, no problem. But just so you know, it's not completely open to the public. It is something that is intended just for people in this program. Yeah, go to the Q&A feature if you have any other questions you'd like to ask us. I'm going to ask Satrina too if there's anything that she would like to add from what has been said so far from your perspective.
Well, I think the biggest thing is just, I mean, you all have been working these projects for the last year. I think we have probably communicated with most of you throughout the year in some way, through just email, or in some instances, we've had some phone consultations about things. And as you finish, particularly as it relates to COVID and your extended deadlines and all of that, as you have questions about revising your budget, revising even your projects of what you're doing, we ask that you would continue just to be in touch with us as you're adjusting with these times that are always changing. So I think that's pretty much it.
Okay, and that's a really good point. We've had a number of you who, you couldn't do what you planned, and hopefully some of that will be possible before November 15. We are not going to extend the projects beyond November 15, though, so that will be a hard deadline then. And if you can't hold your events, we've seen other people find other ways to do them virtually. And then maybe you need a little bit different programs or equipment to pull that off. And there may be some ways to use those funds differently for virtual events. Quite a few of you have done that. But we won't be going past November 15 because then we're pushing up on the next deadline for another round of grants. And that's another question I see in the Q&A, wondering about considering applying for a grant in the future. You certainly are welcome to do that. If you'll be at tables tomorrow, virtual tables with some other folks, and you'll probably bump into folks who say, well, this is our second grant or maybe even our third grant. So you definitely can apply. It's a new application. You go through the process just like you did before. You're finishing now, so that's fine. Sometimes the people who are starting wonder about applying for another grant, and we don't encourage people to apply for a grant while they have one, but now you will be finishing, so it would be possible for you to apply for another year. I think what I would say, it would, you don't necessarily have a leg up on being approved, but it doesn't mean you can't be approved either. It really goes to the quality of the proposal. And when our grants board looks at all the proposals, they look at everything fresh. And yeah, I mean, if we know you and you've had a good project and you did a great job with that, that's data that we have. So that's a good thing, right? But I would encourage you to think about a project that maybe builds on what you did before rather than doing just the same thing, but maybe it's something that grew out of this project, or maybe it's a totally different creative idea that you come up with. So we would encourage creativity, right? And to show how the seeds planted grew and maybe led to other ideas. The next deadline for the Worshiping Communities grants will be January 10, as it is every year. Okay. So some of you, I see a chat about the extension. So for those of you who asked to be extended beyond July for this current project, the final report is due November 15. Okay, if you didn't ask for an extension, then it would be it would be July 15,
Yes.
and you'll get a reminder out of the grants management system. But if you ask for the extension, then we've changed the dates in the program, and your reminders will come at different times.
And also, if you log into the grants management system, you should be able to see all of your deadlines in the grants management system. And so those who have extended your deadlines, those dates have been changed in the grants management system so that they're correct for whatever you ask, you requested. Now, if you, for some reason yours is not correct, please send us an email and just let us know. But we do have the original, emails that were sent back saying which option you chose.
Yeah, and for our planning, we really needed to get those answers in. I'm going to go out on a slight limb here and say that, I mean, if you find that July is coming, you didn't ask for the extension, but you still have some outstanding funds and ideas or, parts of your plan that didn't carry out, and you would like to still request an extension, we would receive that request. Mm-hmm. Okay, we would rather have you be able to do a little more than to have to cut it short. But we also acknowledge that this has been a rough year, and for some people, the idea of taking this project longer just isn't going to work either. They need to be done, and we totally get that too. Okay, so no pressure. We want this to work for you, and we want your projects to succeed and end as well as they can.
And if you have those extensions coming in, when you email us, please, if you can, remember to put your grant number in the email subject line. That helps us tremendously in tracking all of the grantees that we're working with. But your grant number helps us. And then if you could put just deadline extension or something in the subject line so that we can just kind of know where, what we're doing with your with your email. That helps us.
Great. Any other questions out there? I see some people are signing up for the Facebook. After this meeting, I'll go on Facebook and approve all of you. Any other questions that we can answer while we're together? Let's see. Do I see any more here? I want to make sure I've gotten. I have to scroll down. Okay, one person asked about, will you do any more regional follow-up visits like you did years before? We have in the past made some visits. We don't really have a specific grant visit program. Over the past few years, we have, when our team or other members of our staff are traveling for whatever reason, you know, we usually say, hey, see if there's a grant project nearby and you can stop by and say hi. It's not an evaluation, it's more of a learning activity again. We're not traveling right now. So
Nobody's traveling.
we don't even, I mean, from Calvin University, we don't have permission to travel on behalf of the institution at all right now. Whether or not that changes, who knows? I don't think it's going to change real soon, but we'll see. Calvin is hoping to have students back on campus in the fall. But as far as gatherings and programs, we're not quite sure how that's going to go. But now we've learned that we can do a lot of visiting right this way. So maybe we'll have to figure out how to do some grant visits with the Zoom. Let's see, I'm looking at this last question here about your moving your worship. Jim says he's moving worship experiments from gathered to digital. Is it appropriate to use grant funds to purchase digital subscriptions and or equipment to make the digital experience of worship more meaningful? Yes, that would be something that you would come to us as a budget revision. And okay, I'm going to be totally honest here. Our budget form has a limit of 10% for equipment, okay? This is a very unusual situation, and if you have a need that would really help with your goals and that it stretches that 10% a little bit too far, given the extensions and the pandemic and just the unusual nature of this year, we are accepting those kinds of requests, okay? So for Jim or whoever else is thinking about that, if you can't hold events and you want to have better equipment to do virtual things and it goes beyond that 10%, you can still send it to us. And if you give us a good reason, a good rationale for it, we'll probably approve of that because again, we would prefer for you to use the funds there, okay? Let's see, any other questions? We've got a few more minutes before we have to go. And
there are a few more, just a couple more.
I got to keep scrolling, don't I? Our worship grant team members available to help you vision, certainly, especially if you're thinking about applying for another grant. You know, send us an email to worship grants, and sometimes folks send us a paragraph proposal or whatever. That's actually the most helpful. And then we can schedule a phone call or a Zoom and talk about it. In fact, I've got one scheduled for week after next from somebody who wants to talk about an idea for the next round. So yeah, we would be happy to meet with you and talk about the future, especially if you're thinking about applying again. So we're happy to do that. Sandra's question about can you do that virtually? Now, I'm not sure what she was referring to, and I don't know if I answered it or not, but maybe it was about the visits, I think. Yeah, you had asked about visits. So that could be, yeah, virtual visits might be possible. I will say, you know, this program is so rich and as you'll find out when you're round tables tomorrow, you know, it's going to be an interesting year because we added the teacher scholar program and now we've got 2 cohorts of them, and some of those have extended to the fall as well because they couldn't do their research. And we've got all you guys, and we'll have new ones started. So we got a lot of things, a lot of moving parts here, and we love it. And we try to be as responsive as we can. So we'll do our best to connect with you and certainly answer any questions that come by email or yeah, if you prefer a phone call or a Zoom, we're happy to do that too. We really, yeah, this is, what do I say, Satrina? This
This
is
is,
our family. We love you
yeah,
folks, and we
I
just
know.
love. It's painful to not be together, but just seeing your names and the chats next to worship, oh, my heart was just so full.
I know the chats
It's great to be together.
are really encouraging, and yes, we are flexible in this season, and we're grateful that this is helpful for you. If there's, again, we're always accessible through worship grants
Yep.
at calvin.edu. We do the best we can.
Yep. And I'm looking at the chat. I see names like Anthony Bennett, who he's had at least 3 grants to his church, I think. And we see these names, and these are our friends. So, now you're in this group, you're our friends for life. So we're we're just feeling really excited about that. And we do hope that everybody concludes your project well and that we stay connected in the future. We have a big worship symposium event in January every year, and you'll get information about that and even a special rate for grant recipients who've been in this program. This January, it's probably going to be a virtual event, so stay tuned on that. We're already
Staying
planning
tuned.
for it, but we would love for you to stay connected with our institute in other ways too.
And the other thing, particularly because we're in these times that we're in, just look at this as a way to be creative, an opportunity to stretch. And if there are ideas that are out there or questions out there, the Facebook group, it's a private group. I mean, you guys can, you can dialogue with one another. You can ask questions. Has anyone experienced this or that? And learning can take place in that way as well.
Mhm. And if there's particular grants that you hear about this week, or you look at the posters, et cetera, and you want to, have conversation with them directly. I mean, if we were, all together on campus, we would do that. But if there's particular people you want to connect with, we will be glad to connect you as well, so that you can directly contact each other.
And you should have received one-page summaries via email that gives you an overview for each. I mean, you all have gone through the grant process before and been through an event before, so you should have received those. And so just like, and you should have received the posters as well. So if you see somebody that's interesting, a project that you want to know more about, unfortunately, you can't gather in the print center and over coffee, but I mean, we can try to make that happen as best we can with connecting you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I miss the coffee with all those flavors that they have at the print center. I don't have that many at home here.
Right.
Okay, well, we're about to the end of our time. I'm going to check again if there are any other questions.
I think we've got them all so
Looks like
far.
we got them all, but of course you can always email us with your questions. We're happy to answer. And again, thank you so much for being part of this program. Um, yeah, even if we were together on campus, we probably couldn't hug each other, but feel yourself hugged right now. We love you all, and we're so happy with what you've done and how you've adjusted in a really tough year. And we look forward to learning from those reports and staying connected with you in the future. So know that we're super full of gratitude for you and for all that you've done. Thank you very much.
And you can also say that this group was the very first webinar virtual meeting ever.
That's right.
For the
That's
grants event.
right. That's right.
So special. Special group.
Okay.
All
Well,
right.
thanks for all the love and the learning, and I hope you really enjoy the budget revision webinar is at 3:00, and then that's the last thing today for this group, right?
Mm-hmm.
Satrina, we have some
Yes.
consultations with the new folks, but then otherwise we'll see you tomorrow in worship and teacher scholar panels and in virtual learning roundtables. So
Yep.
we got a great day planned tomorrow, and we look forward to seeing you from all your different time zones. we have
Yeah.
one grant from Hawaii, and they're either up late or early. I'm not sure,
I
but
don't know.
we're grateful for all of you.
All right.
Okay, we're going to end this meeting then. Thank you so much. Take care. Oh, somebody's asking about a contact list, Satrina. Do you see that?
Oh, sure.
Which
Okay,
we,
can we?
because
Oh,
when we
that's
came
usually in
to
the book.
campus, we usually put that in the book. So that'll be a follow-up email as well. We'll
Yes.
put together a PDF for you. Okay,
All right.
great.
Great.
Wonderful. Thank
Thank
you
you
so
all
much.
so much.
Take care. We'll see you tomorrow.